Welcome to our podcast. This is another recorded episode of Stay Classy San Diego, with video production and studio provided by MaxLux Media, sponsored by Dorada Nutrition, with your host being myself, Steve Wire, a freelance reporter. This podcast is dedicated to fostering quality dialogue surrounding all things local policy related in North County, San Diego. Join us weekly as we interview political leaders, analysts, professionals, and community members on issues ranging from homelessness to housing density to elections. Well, today we bring to the studio Jay Paris. Jay is the sports columnist at the Coast News and a former colleague of mine. Now Jay moved to Encinitas in 1992, is that correct?
That's correct.
And now lives in Cardiff.
Right on.
Jay graduated from Cal State Fullerton with a degree in journalism, and moved when he started to move here. You covered the Chargers originally,
right?
And then what'd you do after that? You started to
I covered everything.
Everything.
North County Times, Oceanside Blade Citizen. You kind of you pitched in and did everything, but
everything.
I covered the Chargers for about 20 years, and then became a general columnist for North County Times, and then the Union Tribune bought us, and hung on for a little while there before they got rid of all the North County Times guys. But that's a different episode.
Sure, different episode, different time. You're also the author of 3 books,
yes,
which we're going to talk about in a little bit.
All right.
But I just wanted to throw that in there. But first of all, let's talk some Padres. So,
absolutely.
So far, it's been sort of an interesting season. So just for people who haven't been following closely, last year the Padres had sort of a mixed bag of a season, as it were. They had some disappointments during the regular season, and there was the shocking upset of the Dodgers in the NLDS. Eventually went on to lose to the Phillies in the NLCS. But so far this season, I would describe it as somewhat underwhelming in the sense that you have this stacked lineup full of absolute sluggers.
Right.
A stacked pitching staff. And the team right now sits at 17-15, so just above 500. So it hasn't been a failure of a season so far by any stretch. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of people who are slightly underwhelmed by the offense. There's been a few shutout games already. And some of the big guys, Soto, Tatis, maybe haven't gotten going quite as much as we anticipated yet, although Tatis just came back from his suspension. But I just wanted you to quickly sort of recap the season up to this point and sort of explain, looking ahead, what to expect from the Padres.
Yeah, I mean, they came into the season with something they haven't had in a long time, and it's not really something you pack in the overhead bin when you fly to other games, expectations.
Yeah.
And they had these huge expectations coming in, and I really do think some Padres fans thought they were going to go 162-0. That's probably not going to happen in baseball and baseball gods, and baseball just reminded you of what a fickle sport it is. Mm-hmm. And so, Manny Machado hasn't gotten hit yet. Juan Soto was Juan So-So for the first half of that month.
Yeah.
Bogarts has been fantastic, and Tatis is getting back. So, to play, you don't want to say they play badly, but for being average, just look at it. You are what your record says it is. So they've been a little better than average, and they're right there. They're game and 2 out. So, by being where they are after the start they have, I think that's encouraging in itself.
Sure.
Dodgers coming in this weekend, and I think
series.
It's 6 games. The next 6 games against them in the next 10 days.
Yeah.
And we're gonna find out a lot about them right off the bat. That all being said, people have to remember they finished 22 games behind the Dodgers last year. Mm-hmm. They lost 14 of the 19 games by the Dodgers, but it just shows you how important the postseason is. Mm-hmm. And as long as you can get to the postseason, that's really what you're gunning for. But I think maybe the bigger picture is the excitement at Petco Park, the energy at Petco Park. They've already had 10 sellouts, and we're just into May. I mean, they would have 1 sellout a year, and that was, beach towel night, on Saturday night at Qualcomm or Petco, but just the whole culture, everything around Padres baseball has changed.
Sure.
And for the better, unless you're trying to get a ticket for the games this weekend, and a get-in price is $100. The old $5 Park of the Park ticket is now $100.
Yeah, I checked.
Which it translates into you're paying a bigger payroll and everything. So, has everything gone as planned? Probably not. But they're right where they need to be, and there's no panic. There's 130 games still left to go.
Sure. Well, I wanted to talk about that weekend series coming up with the Dodgers. So you make a good point, which is I think it's easy to forget because of how exciting the NLDS was that for pretty much all of last year, the Dodgers dominated the Padres completely.
Yeah.
I think they didn't lose a single series against them.
That's correct.
And the run differential was quite something. Now it is a different Dodgers team this year.
It is.
It's a different Padres team.
Right.
The Dodgers suffered some key injuries as well before the season even started. Lost starting shortstop Gavin Lux.
Right.
A lot of people left in free agency. So what should people expect with this weekend series and the upcoming games against the Dodgers? I mean, is this still the Titanic monster that it was last year, or should expectations be somewhat lower for coming into San Diego?
Yeah, you would ever hate to say the Dodgers with their payroll and their wealth of player development resources are the underdog, but they're kind of running with that this year, and they'll let somebody be the top dog, for a while. When you've won 9 of the last 10 NL West titles, they've been where the Padres are now, expected to win, know. And yes, the Dodgers still expected to win, and that team won 111 games last year. But you mentioned, no more Justin Turner, no more Trey Turner. It's a different look. But I think where the Dodgers excel, maybe more so than the Padres, obviously more than the Padres, is the homegrown talent and the player development. Yeah. And the Padres made a distinct decision: is that we're not going to outsmart these guys right now. So we're going to put our resources into proven players. And they've done that by just looking at that lineup, Bogarts, Manny Machado, all those guys. Where the Dodgers, they still sprinkle in that homegrown talent. I mean, Clayton Kershaw is a homegrown. Gavin Lux would have been homegrown. Muncy and Chris Taylor, those were reclamation projects that, through their player development, that they were able to rise up. So I think it illustrates too, the Padres probably have more stars, but the Dodgers have more depth. And over a 162 game season, that depth plays out. And that's why they won 111 games last year. But in the playoffs, when you're in a short series, sometimes that star talent can carry you more because you don't have the length to prove your depth, So they're both coming kind of at it different ways, which I find fascinating and kind of a contrast. And the Padres someday, they want to have the farm system too because they don't have any homegrown players.
Sure.
You could say Tatis because he came in when he was 17 years old, but he was acquired too. So it shows the different ways you construct a roster, shows a different way of philosophy, and it shows that both ways can work. It'll just be interesting to see if that depth that the Dodgers have can win out over the stars that the Padres have, when it counts the most, which is the playoffs,
Well, I'm curious, because there's sort of this narrative that I see, and I don't know. I'm curious to think if you think there's anything to it, that the Padres are sort of built right now for the short term. They're built to win now. They're built for success in the short term, for this year, for next year. Whereas the Dodgers, with their farm system, with their player development, they've sort of been this consistent machine of consistency, sort of almost the New England Patriots of baseball. And there's sort of this narrative out there that the Dodgers are more built for long-term success, whereas the Padres are more built to win now. Do you buy into that?
But the caveat would be that these players that the Padres have are going to be here long-term.
Sure.
Now, whether they're productive toward the tail end of those contracts,
at least Machado and
Tatis, Musgrove, Darvish, Cronenworth. I mean, all these guys are going to be here for a long time. At least their contract says. Things change all the time. So, that was the big thing with Mr. Seidler, and he was getting so much grief from a lot of the other owners, even the commissioner weighed in that this isn't sustainable. How can you do this? They have 10 sellouts. Peter Seidler's nobody has more Dodger roots than Peter Seidler. His grandfather was Walter O'Malley. His mom's brother was Peter O'Malley, who ran the Dodgers all those years. So while he's certainly the Padres architect, there's a lot of Dodger DNA in there. Tremendous amount of Dodger DNA. And they always field competitive teams, and they always had stars, and they always draw. So Mr. Seidler, who runs a $1 billion equity fund, decided, I'm going to invest in the stars and see what happens. We know what happens when the team wasn't very good, not very many people came, or the tourists came, or so. Now they're getting sellouts. Now they're selling merchandising. Now their brand has expanded to Mexico, where they're extremely popular.
Yeah,
and
the Mexico series.
And that was all, not all, but it was so much Padre fans. And it's one thing to see Padre hats in Tijuana, but that's pretty deep into Mexico, and it was like all Padre people. So it's a different vision from an owner. I think the owner's looking at it more long-term, how I can be successful, rather than, for a while here, we had short-term owners who would buy the club, strip it down, keep your labor costs down, and sell it, and make tons of money. Seiler, he's got a brother, he's got kids. I mean, they're in it for a while, they're in it for a long term. And unlike another family around here who ran pro sports, Spanos family.
Yeah.
The Seidler family will do whatever it takes to win. And does it cost money? Heck yeah, it costs money. But on the other side, they're bringing in an awful lot of revenue too. So it's an interesting approach. And will he be able to hold on? We'll see. Will Manny and those guys, Bogarts be any good when they're in their 40s? I don't know. But sometimes people say, well, that contract didn't work. He only hit 212, or that contract didn't work because he had 40 yards. Sometimes contracts work off the field. You're able to generate revenue. You're able to generate advertising. You're able to generate ratings that, while it doesn't show up in the box score, and if you're a businessman, they're crushing it on the business side right now, as they should. They have a lane that is enviable to any other city in America. They're the only city, especially now with Oakland leaving, the A's leaving, the Las Vegas, the only city to only have one team from the 4 big leagues. Every other city, every other team has to compete with the NBA, NHL, NFL. The Padres have this lane all to themselves.
This is their market.
This is their market, and they're taking full advantage of it, and they're making some good money. And I feel happy for the Padre fans and San Diego fans overall. That was a tough, ripping the Band-Aid off when the Chargers left. Let's face it. And that was a big blow to San Diego, as it should have been. And for the fans to get the blame for that was a joke. It was the ownership driven for sure. So there's this thirst for success through sports in San Diego that is off the charts. And we saw a little bit with San Diego State, and with the Padres can give that too. So smart business guy, Peter Seidler's nobody's dummy. He's figured this out. And if the fallout from him, peeling the onion back, if you will, his way is winning baseball, I think it's fabulous. Because, for San Diego not to have a good baseball team is like living in Vail and not having a good ski team. You know what I mean?
Sure.
San Diego baseball, that is San Diego baseball. And from little leagues to the colleges, all the way up. Then it would hit the pros. And all these kids would be rooting for Mike Trout, or all these kids would be rooting for Derek Jeter, know. Now they're rooting for their guys, the Bogarts, the Tatis, the Machados. And for about 20 years, that didn't happen around here, and now it's happening again.
Sure. Well, I did want to talk a little bit about some of the specific players that you mentioned. So far this season, we've seen, as you said, Bogarts has been off the charts.
Right.
He's been great. Obviously, looks like a great addition from the management standpoint. But some of the stars have sort of underperformed. Juan Soto's hitting about 227 right now, which, it's not horrible, but at the same time, he's Juan Soto.
Right.
He was arguably one of the best trade acquisitions in baseball history last year. And you have Blake Snell on the pitching staff side, who seems to have been up and down.
Yeah.
He has a 5.28 ERA right now. So what can you tell us about, is there any rhyme or reason to why these stars are struggling? Tatis, it's a little early to say he's struggling because he's been back for such a short period of time. But, it's going to take a while to get him, back into the swing of things, as it were. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe, as I said, the rhyme or the reason to why some of the stars are struggling, and if this is a long-term concern?
Yeah, I think it's more baseball. And it's just such a long 6-month season. And we're seeing a small sample size.
Yeah.
That's like if you go to a really nice steak restaurant, and the appetizer was so-so, you still stick around for the steak, and the steak's dynamite, So you had a good meal, you had a good season. We're in the appetizer mode right now, and maybe the clams or whatever aren't so good, but you're going to stick around for that main course. So in baseball, that's what makes it so great. It evens out over, not always, but usually over 6 months, you're going to be able to tell, right and left. I think Soto, I think he was pressing, it's human nature. Those guys aren't robots, And there's a gentleman who turned down a $440 million contract, which was a heck of a contract to turn down with the Washington Nationals. That's why he became available when he turned that down. So I think he's feeling the pressure on that a little. And Snell, he's always, schizophrenic, up and down. You never know what you're going to get with him.
Kind of a weird guy.
Yeah, he's quirky, we like to say. Yeah. But he usually shines in the second half. If you could get second half Snell in the first half, he'd be Sandy Koufax. But he's not. But you'll take the second half snail if you'll go through the first half. So, and Tatis, coming back from not playing in a couple of years, that's tough on anybody. I don't care who you are, but he's going to be fine. But you still feel them. They're kind of finding their feet. They're finding their way. Now Tatis is in right field, Soto's in left field, and the pitching's been pretty good. They'll get some arms back in the bullpen. It just shows the level the Padres have risen to when we almost nitpick on what's not going right. Where in the old days you would cling on to something that was going right, and ride that thing. So I think they're just going to be fine. But again, it's such a long season. Somebody's arm's going to fall off. Somebody's going to blow a knee. Something always happens in baseball. And, there's the San Diego, they like to call it the San Diego curse. Something will happen maybe, and maybe it won't. But they're in a pretty good spot. And I'm just glad all these fans who've been very patient are getting to enjoy it.
No, absolutely. As you said, 10 sellouts so far.
That's right.
Probably a lot more to come this year.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And but I wanted to talk about, and this is sort of an intangible, but, I mean, we've talked about the stars, but, like, as far as, again, kind of circling back to this idea of long-term success, I mean, you've covered sports a long time, and I'm curious, in your opinion, like what you think, other than stars, it takes to build not just short-term success, but sort of a winning culture on a baseball team. Because, I mean, again, look at the Dodgers. It seems to be like a winning culture for the last 10 years. It seems like it doesn't matter who comes in. They keep winning division titles. Looking outside of baseball, you have the Patriots under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. You have the Golden State Warriors in basketball for so long. Before that you had the Lakers. So what does it take to build a winning culture, and do the Padres sort of have that secret ingredient?
You have to give the fringe players or the margin players, it's not fair to say they're fringe players, but I mean, it's a 25, 26-man roster.
Yeah.
And you have to make those guys on the margins of that roster feel just as important as the stars. Now, are they? No.
That's reality.
Yeah, that's reality, but because that 24th, 25th guy is going to be called on to produce in the 8th inning sometime. That pitcher, that spot starter is going to be asked to carry the load sometime. We go back to, again, the season being so long that you need the entire roster. And that's why sometimes when this doesn't work, because I grew up an Angels fan, when they would bring in, Reggie Jackson, Bobby Grich, Fred Lynn, who lives in Carlsbad here, and they were so top-heavy in stars that, the top of the lineup was great, then it goes, the lineup would just fall off. And if you don't have good role players, and the baseball game has turned into such a matchup game as well, the righties and lefty-righties, that you got to have a full squad. It just demands it. And it goes back to your point of culture. And I think they have a great guy in Bob Melvin. I think they have a dynamite manager there. And that's why he'll give guys days off, not only to let the guy get off his feet, but to let Matt Carpenter get a start. Or not only let a star to exhale for a day, but just so another guy can plug in, So you got to keep everybody involved. You got to keep everybody engaged, because it'll happen. They'll need a base hit from Matt Carpenter, or they'll need somebody to do something, and who's not one of the guys whose name's on the marquee out there, But it goes back to organizational culture. Your organization that starts at the top. If you're playing for the Padres, the owner wants to win. Preller will pull rabbits out of a hat. And you look around the clubhouse and you see these proven players. So when you walk in, even though if you're not one of the stars, you're going, if all these guys think that much of me, I want to rise my game up. And once you do that, you've got a good ball club.
Sure. And it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from you, though, that they are doing that right now.
They are
curating that and developing that. And last thing on this point is, I just want to ask, do you think that, so last year, 111 win Dodgers, 22 wins up in first place, and then they lose in the NLDS to the Padres. And I'm curious, there was sort of this narrative from a couple sports writers that the difference in the postseason sort of comes down to energy. It comes down to which team has the energy, heating up at the right time. It seemed like the Padres had more energy in their dugout, they were more excited, they were more emotional, more expressive. The Dodgers were a little more stony faced. And
right.
Do you feel like this Padres team right now sort of has that sort of team chemistry, that emotion that they need to sort of carry them in a postseason series?
We'll find out.
Yeah.
You really can't say it. You certainly think it is, and absolutely they were more animated last year. Look, if for 10 straight years you dated a supermodel, that it wouldn't be routine, but that's your supermodel. if you're dating a supermodel for the first time, imagine how excited you'd be. Well, the Padres were dating a supermodel for the first time last year, and the Dodgers.
They just looked like they wanted it more.
Yeah, they did. Well, again, if you haven't had something and the other person has had that for 10 years straight, of course you're going to be a little more hungrier, a little more fired up. But it'll be interesting to see. But I think a lot of that too goes back to the crowds and the fans and the San Diego being excited about having a winner again. I mean, they can't not have their energy at home. It's impossible. It's a party. It's unbelievable what it is down there these days.
Yeah.
And the Dodgers were more businessmen. They were the blue chip guys. They were the IBM guys. They were the stacked portfolio. Not conservative, but what I mean, kind of regular stone face. Where the Padres were the new kids on the block. But it's a point well brought up by you. Can you sustain that energy? Can you, can you do it again? Can you act like it's the first time when it's the fifth time or when it's the sixth time?
Sure.
And that's they think they have that, but until that rubber hits the road, you really don't know.
Sure. Another point I want to talk about is trade rumors. So something that we were talking about before the podcast was the concept of a trade involving Shohei Ohtani, who, if people don't know, is sort of the Angels' marquee superstar, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I would say he is baseball's marquee superstar.
Yeah,
he's a global superstar.
I didn't want to overstep, but I think you're right on. I don't think it's an overstatement.
It's not even close.
And so Shohei Ohtani, pitching and hitting for the Angels, he's been outstanding, but there's sort of this sense that you get within the organization, the Angels organization, at least from scouts, from sports writers, that he wants to play for a contender long term in his career at some point. And that is sort of the feeling that we've gotten. And Shohei is clearly not with a contender right now in the Angels. I know it's early on in the season, but if this season is anything like the last several seasons, the Angels are not going to be in contention once the postseason rolls around. So there's been a lot of speculation that Shohei will go elsewhere at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
In fact, one sports writer that I read recently said that it's basically a certainty that if the Angels are not in contention by July, that he will be looking for another team. He will also be a free agent after this year. So what do you make of the trade rumors involving Shohei Ohtani? Who do you think are the likely candidates, and where do you think it ends up?
I think he stays on the West Coast.
Yeah.
We've done this before. When he came over here, he got his pick of any team he wanted.
Yeah.
He whittled it down to 7 teams, and all were on the West Coast except for the Rangers and Chicago Cubs. So I think Shohei will go where he wants to go, do what he wants to do. He loves San Diego. And A.J. Preller has never been all in on a player more than he's been on Shohei Ohtani. He's known Shohei Ohtani since, I want to say, maybe 8th, 9th grade, 10th grade.
Sure.
He learned Japanese so he could communicate with Shohei Ohtani.
Kidding.
Shohei Ohtani has been on A.J. Preller's crosshairs probably for 10 years, So and you got to remember, too, he would bring over Shohei's Nippon Ham Fighters team, and they would train in Peoria. They trained in Peoria for 2 years before he came over here with the Padres at Peoria. He's hired people from that organization. They were like this. So, and Shohei always said his favorite city when he was doing his tour was San Diego. So, I think they'll be in the running. I think the Angels, I don't know if they're going to trade him or not. It would be a tough thing to trade that guy away. But I think Shohei is going to go where Shohei wants. Like everybody says, well, if he went to New York, imagine the endorsements. He's $65 million in endorsements already. He does. His brand is almost as big as the Yankee brand. His brand's crazy. But with there now being designated hitter in both leagues, it opens up a lot of possibilities for him.
Sure.
I just think he would stay on the West Coast. I don't know if a lot of people said the Dodgers were quiet this year for their big quest next year to go after Shohei. That's why they didn't do much this year. That's why they
there's any stock in that? Or
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Japanese community, the Asian community in LA, the Hideo Nomo threw a no-hitter for the Dodgers. There's a strong Japanese culture there, and if you want to go with a winner, they've proven year in, year out they're going to be in it. So, I don't know what you could get for him in a trade. It would have to be a trade and sign deal. He's absolutely phenomenal. And then you look too, how long can he do it? I don't know. This is a trailblazer now.
Sure.
So, does his body break down at some point? Father Time's undefeated, and he's still a young man. but you just wonder about the demands. But this guy's a unicorn now, and certainly not in my lifetime will we ever see a player like him. Maybe you, but he's off the charts, and the Padres aren't sleeping on him being available. Let's put it that way.
Well, do you think the Dodgers have the advantage in terms of landing Shohei because of their farm system, because of the prospects that they would potentially have to offer to the Angels? Or
that's good. You know, that goes back to how the Dodgers are so successful. You know, they pick last every year, just about in the draft. You know, the byproduct of being successful, but they have the top-ranked farm system. You know, they while other teams, you know, funnel money, you know, to players and what's on the field. They funnel money like to think tanks. They funnel money to player development. You know, if your team has 2 coaches, the Dodgers will have 5. If your team has 3 data analytical guys, the Dodgers will have 6. I mean, they just, because they know they have to be better player development because the players aren't as good as everybody else. You know, so leading back to what a team could offer, they could clean out their farm system. Where the Padres don't have much left. They've cleaned out their farm system to get Soto. That's so it's why it's so critical almost to keep him, because you gave up Abrams, you gave up Mackenzie Gore. I mean, you turn on the Washington National game, it's all Padre players on that. So, and they've got some decisions to make. I mean, do you offer Soto $500 million, or do you save that for Shohei, or do you try to sign them both? I mean, at some point, I guess the printing press quits spitting out $100 bills with Mr. Seidler, although he'll say otherwise. So it's a great component, and it's a great story, and one that's certainly not going to go away this season.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking like Shohei to the Dodgers. I mean, that'd be quite the pitching staff. I mean, once Walker Buehler comes back from Tommy John surgery, I mean, you'd have what would be Urias.
Yeah. Who's a come free agent? They got to figure that one out too.
Him out, and then you know, Otani and
Kershaw. That's
Dustin May. I mean, that's
pretty
rotation.
loaded. Yeah, that's pretty
loaded. If that
loaded.
happens, I mean, we'll see. I mean, again, as you said, the speculation I've heard all tends to be, you know, he's going to stay on the West Coast.
Right.
I know there's been recently some flurry about the Pirates. I don't think he's going to go to the Pirates personally.
I wouldn't
think he's going to stay on the West Coast. So we'll see. I mean, either way, it's going to be quite the monster of a team. Padres or Dodgers.
No matter what team he goes on. Yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk about, like, as far as other than Shohei Ohtani, I mean, the trade deadline, I mean, it's a little early, but I mean, it's only 2 months away. Like, are there any other moves that you expect, or that the Padres or the Dodgers or any other team should make for that matter?
Yeah, I think the Padres are going to wait and see. I mean, they've kind of got their roster, but I think it'd be more injury-driven if somebody got hurt. You know, they're all in. You know, they've pushed all these chips in the middle of the table. So if somebody gets hurt or they need to plug something in, I don't think they're going to be reticent to not do that. And you know, we'll see. That you're either a buyer or seller, right? You know, and I certainly don't see them selling much, but you're always looking for arms in the bullpen. You're always looking for more arms. You know, but Shohei is definitely going to command the most attention. That's for sure.
Hey there, San Diego. If you're on the hunt for a way to enhance your health, I have a great recommendation for you. Dorado Nutrition is a company that's all about helping people live their best lives through top-notch, American-made supplements. Their expert team has crafted products to support a variety of health needs, from weight management to muscle building and more. And with ingredients like Vodosia agrestis and Tonkat Ali, praised by a well-known neurobiologist seen on the Joe Rogan podcast, these supplements could be just what you need to reach your health goals. And for a limited time, you can get 25% off your purchase by using promo code SD2023 at checkout. So if you're looking for a way to improve your health, Dorado Nutrition might just be the solution you need. I agree. All right, last point on baseball is it's only 2 months in. What at this point is your World Series favorite? Who's your World Series favorite?
Wow, that's a good one. Those Rays look pretty good. Tampa Rays, yeah.
Really good.
But to go through the American League, the Astros, and that's a good question. I would go probably Rays, and then the American League, and I'll go either Dodgers or Padres for the other side.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, the Rays' hot start, like, I mean, it's not meaningless, but again, you know, looking at last year, you know, 111 wins for those Dodgers.
Right.
And you know, I mean, it's just one of those things where it just really seems like it's just so much about getting hot at the right time. Because anything can happen in a short, you know, 5-game series or whatever. I mean, it seems like it's not always about being the best team in the season to win it all. It seems like it's being the best team at the right time with the right energy.
Right. Well, look, the Boston Bruins set a record in the NHL this year for most wins and most points.
Yeah.
Got bounced in the first round. The Milwaukee Bucks had the best record in the NBA. Lost in the first round, So, you don't want to say regular season is meaningless, especially in baseball, because you have to play one less series if you, win the division. And so, but it does show that sometimes you see people, biting bullets and having this angst over a loss on May 8th or something. You're going, dude, it's May 8th, This really doesn't mean much in the big picture, But that's the joy. And I hope, too, which sometimes Dodger fans didn't do, is to enjoy the journey. I mean, this is going to be a great season all year long, and then at the end we'll see, what the final chapter is, But it's enjoy May, June, enjoy this winning baseball, enjoy going out to the ballpark, And whether they win or lose or not is important, but it's not the most important thing ever. It always comes down to the playoffs.
I agree. So let's talk about another San Diego sports team that had quite the historic run.
Right.
That's those Aztecs over at SDSU. I mean, I was out and about at that time, and like the energy was just unreal all around San Diego the whole time during that run in March. I mean, all the way to the finals. Like I was in Pacific Beach, I think, during the Final Four when the final score came down. And I mean, just the reaction, like the energy of that moment, like I'll never forget. So like, basically, looking back on that historic run, like what did that sort of mean to San Diego, and how shocking was that to the basketball world?
Yeah, I think it circles back to losing the Chargers, and I think it circles back to this craving that San Diego has, and little brother inferiority complex. I don't really buy into all that, but let's face it, the nickname is America's finest city, not Title Town. Okay, San Diego, if you want to, and I do, but 1963, the San Diego Chargers were the AFL champions. That's about it. And 63 was a long time ago. And there's just this craving for, success and winning and what the Aztecs did and how they did it. Tough defense, not guys playing above the rim, not really the high flying act, more of just blue-collar basketball,
Gritty.
Yeah, gritty, absolutely gritty. You never wanted to play them. Tough rebounders, physical. And so for them to go knock off, when they knocked off Alabama, that was unbelievable, the number 1 overall seed. And like people like you do, I was in some little, cantina in Carlsbad when the guy hits the shot, in Lamont. And you remember where you are or were, when that happened. And I think it's kind of payback, too, from a couple of years ago when they had a 30-win season and weren't able to go to the NCAAs because of the pandemic, and that team was loaded and they were stacked. So it was kind of like, hey, you owe us one, basketball gods. We're due here. And for Brian Dutcher to see it through and to have Coach Fisher around still and going to the games, and I can remember when he was giving out tickets on campus. They were horrible, San Diego State, and to see what he's built and to see it keep going and to see the city embrace it and the fans. Look, there's talk about them maybe going to the Pac-12. If that was so, they would have the second highest attendance in basketball. Only Arizona would beat them out of all the Pac-12 teams. So it illustrates, how much they are connected to the city and how popular they are. And now you get to reload. You don't have to recruit as much when you go to the Final Two. Your people are knocking on your doors instead of knocking on other ones. So, they're going to lose a lot of guys. You got 7 seniors, a couple juniors will probably leave. So he's definitely going to have to reload. But he's got a couple freshmen coming in that redshirted last year, and it's just a good program. We've talked earlier about the culture and the expectations. I mean, that culture for San Diego State basketball, which fermented by Coach Fisher, the great Coach Fisher, that's a standard, and you have to play up to that standard. And Kawhi Leonard, and you got guys that have gone through there and gone on to greater things, and these kids going in there, you say, why not me? Why can't I do that? So, but I'm going to get in the program, see what it can do for me. How can this program benefit me? How can I grow my game? How can it grow me as a person? And San Diego State has that. And usually after when a coach at a non-Power 5 school does something like Brian did, he's out the door, because the bigger schools will come calling. Sure. But, at his age and what he's established here, I don't think he's going anywhere. And just by hanging around, I think he's going to be in a Power 5 conference with them joining either Pac-12 or Big 12.
Sure. So I wanted to ask, and not to be overly repetitive with this question, but like as far as same thing with the Padres as I asked earlier, it was like, is this team as it stands now? I mean, I know there are some big departures, but do you feel like the organization is built for that long-term success, or was this sort of a flash in the pan run? Keep your expectations low. I mean, for instance, I think of my alma mater, UCLA, like they had that big run to the Final Four. What was it, 2-3 years ago?
Right.
Kind of shocking the world, and then it sort of petered out after that the last couple of years. So I'm not asking you to predict the future, but do you think that we should expect that long-term organizational success, that winning culture, or should we sort of keep those expectations low for now?
I think that San Diego State's never been in a better spot. And that while that team was extremely successful, now UCLA didn't do too bad last year. Come on, I'm a Bruin guy too.
Okay.
But, it wasn't a star-driven team.
Sure.
That San Diego State, it was role players and big guys. So if they do leave, it's not like you're replacing the guy who averaged 40 a night, So with the type of team they build, it's sums bigger than the individuals. That's just how they go. And I think with the talk and the options of them joining the Big 12 or the Pac-12, I think the Pac-12 would be an automatic no-brainer. I mean, that's why maybe some players shied away. Playing in the Mountain West isn't playing in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And playing in the Mountain West isn't playing in the Big 12. So, I mean, they have proven they can say we've done it. They've always said, here's what we want to do. They can still say, here's what we want to do, but here's what we've done. And that's a compelling argument for somebody to come to San Diego State, point to Leonard. It's a program on the rise and a school on the rise, and who wouldn't want to live in San Diego, other than Eli Manning, but that's okay.
Sure. I did want to ask, you've touched on it a couple of times, so let's get into it in terms of the question of the Pac-12.
Right.
So there's been talk of the Aztecs joining the Pac-12. I believe Gonzaga has also been mentioned as a contender. How do you see that playing out, and is this good? Would this be a good move for the Aztecs and a good move for the Pac-12?
Yeah, Pac-12 needs a Southern California presence. How can you be the Pac-12 with nothing in Southern California?
I agree.
So with UCLA and USC moving on to the Big Ten, I mean, that's a lot of eyeballs that's looking to look at Pac-12 play, if you will. And I just think the quality of athlete you get, you're probably not going to get the guy UCLA wants, or maybe even USC, but now you can say, look, you can stay at home. Your family can watch you play in the Pac-12. You don't have to fly back every weekend to go play the Big Ten schools and all that. So I think it's totally beneficial for San Diego State and for the recruiting to say you're now playing in the Pac-12 instead of the Mountain West. I mean, that's a big carrot. And I think, again, Pac-12 would be wise to grab them before somebody else does. We've seen the consolidation of all these conferences, and it's definitely the haves and the haves not. And I think that basketball run really cemented them going to the Pac-12 sooner than later.
Yeah. One more thing on this. I wanted to talk about, and this is going to get into our next major topic, but there was an interesting article that I read recently. I forget what paper, but it was about San Diego State Aztecs, and it was about specifically athletes coming or not coming to SDSU based off of the name, image, likeness, endorsement deals that they offer. Now, we're going to get into the NIL topic in a minute, but basically, just to quickly summarize for people who aren't aware, in the last couple of years, the development has been that in basically NCAA sports, we now have a situation where student athletes are allowed to profit off of their name, image, likeness. So that means advertising, that means endorsement deals. I wrote an article on it last year about several San Diego athletes who've benefited from social media advertisements. So I wanted to talk about whether you think SDSU currently markets itself correctly in that regard, because the article I read was essentially arguing that some athletes might steer clear of SDSU based off of the lack of NIL deals. And I wanted to get your take on it, whether you think there's any truth to that.
Absolutely. I think they've just recently lost a couple of potential transfers. Nebraska was able to offer, X amount of dollars, and Miami offered X amount of dollars, and San Diego State didn't come close. Is it fair? I don't know. Is it reality? Yes. Is it capitalism? Yes. why can't a kid make money off his name, image, and license? If you're playing saxophone in the school band and you write a #1 hit, you get the money, right?
Yeah.
Why does this money go to these bureaucrats wearing suits who the fans don't come to watch play? I think it's an avenue of labor that's been exploited for generations, which is sad in one point. And again, this isn't new paying players. This is just saying the whispers out loud, In the SEC handshakes, famous, you had a nice game, kid, and the guy slips you a couple $100. It's called the SEC handshake,
Sure.
So what the San Diego State has to do, if they want to play with the big boys, they're going to have to generate more revenue or find a rich donor, or that's just how the game is played now. Is it fair? Will everybody get paid the same? Will the third string guard make as much as the first string center? No. Does that happen in real life? Does the doctor make more than another gentleman working at a fast food place? Yes. I mean, that's just your skill level and what you want to do, and it's just now finally filtered down to college athletes, young men and women who ought to be able to benefit from the sacrifices they made. But to your point, San Diego State's going to have to raise some money. I mean, you don't sit down, you don't beg to play poker with all the guys and sit down and then complain about the ante. If you want to play, if you want to go, okay. If you want to run with the big dogs, you got to get off the porch or whatever that old saying is. So they do need to increase that money to pay the athletes, which they're making so much revenue on the other hand, certainly warranted, but they are lacking, initially on that, and that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, it just always struck me as odd that you have these easily multi-million dollar sports programs all over the country, grossing these millions of dollars, and that money is going towards administration. It's going towards paying for the coach, I guess.
Absolutely.
I don't know where else it goes, but and then you have these athletes who, at the end of the day, they're still going home thinking about how they're going to pay for lunch.
Yeah, and getting in trouble for a free sandwich or something.
Yeah, and it's always struck me as odd and a little unjust.
Yeah,
and so
exploitation is a word you're looking for.
Yeah, exploitation. So I mean, regardless of the concerns over equity, which I'll get into in a second, do you feel as though NIL has had a net positive effect on college sports in general?
To the people it affects the most, the players, yes, for sure. Now, are some colleges going to be left behind? Yes. Have we consolidated into 3 or 4 big conferences? Yes. That's just the evolution of the college game and the evolution of amateur sports. And things change and things rarely stay the same. And I think it was an injustice that was a long time coming and being rectified to a degree. And again, the NCAA only had decades to figure all this out. They could have implemented some program or gave each guy a stiplet or gave some money. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Instead, they just kept burying their heads in the sand. And Ed O'Brien, an old Bruin, UCLA, I mean, he was one of the first guys that brought it up, and the antitrust and just not being fair. So I think it's going to cause a shakeout. I think not a lot, but some schools may just go non-scholarship or just like USD or something. They don't give scholarships, and they have a good football program. But I think you have to get past the idea that we're going to go for the national title this year. And that's one thing. San Diego State would have some good years, but they're not the SEC, and there's a handful of teams that are going to be there at the end usually, no matter what. It's like basketball. Well, March Madness, everybody has a chance, 64 teams. Yeah, but usually it's Duke, North Carolina, usually it's the same blue blood programs that rise to the top. But I anytime the money filters down to the labor, I think it's a good thing.
I would agree. I did want to ask, on that note though, when we talk about equity, I mean, so the first year of NIL endorsements totaled around $1 billion in total income for athletes. That's a lot of money.
Right.
Now, given this though, do you think that, I guess, is there a valid concern that the bigger athletes are sort of taking in all the endorsements and leaving very little to the smaller names and smaller sports?
Which is capitalism, which is America, which is, everybody isn't paid the same. You don't treat the third string tight end the same way as you do as the star quarterback. That's, to think otherwise, Pollyannish, I think.
But do you think there's a disparity in sports? Do you think some sports are being adversely affected by the inequity created by NIL.
You know, that's a good point. It could, but you got to remember too, those successful football programs often pay for everything. You know, you go to an SEC softball game or something, you know, they got the best of everything. You know, you go to tennis, you know,
True.
It filters down if you can get it at the top. It's an interesting question, and but again, you mentioned the $1 billion. That money was always there. It's just being funneled in a different direction. It's not like all this new money showed up, you know, but instead of it going into the athletic department and they divvy it out, that same money is now going straight to the source. So it's so new that to say a compelling answer one way or the other would be a bit premature. But I'm encouraged, and I just hated when the coaches could get paid for wearing a logo. The coach could leave without having to sit out a year. Sure. You know, the coach is preaching, you know, how we're all part of this family together, and, you know, a job offer leaves and he's gone and you're stuck there for 4 years because you believe the coach you said he was going to be there. You know, I just think it creates a lot more options for the labor, for the players. And a great illustration of that is this upcoming season in Los Angeles, Justin Herbert will be the 3rd highest paid quarterback. Number 1, Matthew Stafford. Number 2, Caleb Williams. Number 3, Justin Herbert. So it just shows you the power.
Surprise Williams is at number 2.
Yeah. Well, he's not going to make more than Stafford yet.
Yeah.
But you coming off a Heisman Trophy, you know, the key is that Justin Herbert's still on his rookie contract. He said that could change at any minute. So, but it just shows you how powerful this is when a gentleman still at USC is making more than the Chargers starting quarterback.
Sure. Now I wanted to ask also, like, as far as NIL and equity goes, I mean, it's one thing for, as you said, the reality is, you know, a 3rd-string tight end's not going to be making as much as a star quarterback. But do you at least feel as though the current landscape of NIL, that everyone out there sort of has equal opportunity at taking advantage of NIL, or is it one of those situations where NCAA needs to step in, sort of like the government intervenes in the free market, you know, and breaks up trusts or whatever, you know, or monopolies, and institutes some kind of regulation to make the playing field more fair? Do you feel as though regulation is needed in order to make the playing field more equitable for players of all sports?
I think they had that chance.
Yeah. And
they didn't act on it. So to think now that they're going to be benevolent, or they're going to be able to come up with something after decades of sitting on this issue and not doing anything, that it would be a bit optimistic. But you know, the other side is you see women gymnasts getting deals now, and you see, you know, women golfers, you know, and I think it's filtered down maybe a little more and into other sports than people think. And you know, you can get a lot of bang for your buck, you know, giving money to, if you're the local hamburger place, just anybody. You know, they waited so long, and now you could see it coming. I mean, you didn't have to be especially with this new generation, you know, they're educated. They don't take BS, and they can tell when something's not right. I mean, they're smart, you know, and they're smart financially as well. So I think the final answer will play out. Maybe it hasn't played out yet, but it's different. It's a new frontier out there. And back to San Diego State now, if they're going to play with these big boys like they've been asking all these years, and how long have they wanted to get in the Pac-10, the Pac-12, back to when it was the Pac-8? You know, they always wanted in. Well, if you get in it now, you know, other components of that athletic department, either through donors or generated income, is going to have to step up.
Sure. Well, with all that being said, you know, I think that with NIL, like, regardless of, you know, whether, you know, athletic departments have to step up, regardless of what the NCAA does, I mean, I think that overall, as we've said before, not to be repetitive, but the net effect of this is overwhelmingly positive for student athletes who, as you said, for so long have been exploited by these institutions, not able to take advantage of the millions of dollars coming off of their own names. And so I think that the important thing to understand is that at the end of the day, this is about the athletes. They're the ones playing the sport. And so we should be thinking about them and their interests first.
Well, I think, too, that you have to comprehend or recognize the explosion of money that has come into college athletics. You know, it's one thing when they had one game on, you know, with the internet and the streaming and the thirst for live sports content. You know, the money, these are billion-dollar contracts now, you know. It's not like it was a handshake and a couple $100, you know. I mean, with that explosion, I just think it wasn't fair to the people who were causing the explosion, the players, the workers, the labor, didn't get to reap the benefits, you know. And finally, they're starting to reap the benefits, and I see that as a plus.
I do too. Well, we do have to wrap up in a minute, but last thing I wanted to touch on is just sort of a broader question, which is just recapping everything that we've talked about today and anything that we didn't talk about. I mean, for somebody who, you know, as you said, you know, San Diego isn't really considered title town.
No.
You know, it's America's finest city. Yeah. But for somebody who's sort of been like tapped out of San Diego sports for a while, who maybe hasn't been paying attention like so much, I mean, what's something to be really excited about for San Diego sports as we approach sort of the middle of 2023 going to 2024? Like what long term is there to be excited about, and why should people pay attention?
You have a great owner in Peter Seidler.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys, San Diego hit the lottery with this gentleman. You know, it's all about ownership.
Sure. In
any business, you know, let's say, or any organization. And to have a gentleman at the top with those deep of pockets and such a deep well of wanting, he wants to be the guy to bring the championship to San Diego. You know, they'll build a statue for this guy someday. You know, I'm convinced of that. Mm. You know, he is that engaged and that all in and whatever it takes. So that would be my biggest one. And then the promise of San Diego State and what it can bring, and a new football stadium and a new conference, and the basketball team doing so well, and the football, you know, football's always been pretty good. Now they might have to change their ways a little bit too. I mean, they've been run the ball, ground and pound, because you couldn't get the skilled athletes as much. They'd usually go to UCLA or SC or the Pac-12, you know, where they throw the ball. You know, San Diego State football, they run it and play defense, which can be successful, but sometimes it's not real easy on the eyes. So maybe that changes too, and to get a more wide open. You know, this is the land of Air Coryell, you know. So I think the San Diego State program's in a great shape, and I think as well that the Padres in a great shape. And you know, those are the two biggest drivers other than beaches and margaritas in San Diego. So sure. If they're doing well, I think that bodes well for everybody.
The beaches and margaritas, let's not overlook that though. I mean, it is Cinco de Mayo. And,
that's right.
It is Padres-Dodgers weekend, so we got a big weekend coming up.
It
so,
does.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jay, for coming on the show. Really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
your time.
My pleasure.
And yeah, let's make it a regular thing.
You got it, my friend.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Guys, that's a wrap. This has been another recorded episode of Stay Classy San Diego with your host, Steve Wire. Thanks again to our sponsors, MaxLux Media at maxluxmedia.com and Dorado Nutrition at doradonutrition.com. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning into the show. See you next time. Stay classy, San Diego.